Hello, welcome back to Aetheral Space 13.71, Inhuman. We are back.
Yes, this is a long one, and it starts with a flashback, which is how you know it's going to go hard. Without further ado, 20 years ago. It was deep into the night when they took the child for initiation. That couldn't be helped. What they were about to show the child was highly illegal. It wouldn't do for prying eyes to watch their gathering, or for prying ears to hear their words. Still, the child found it annoying. He had been pulled out of bed, after all, and forced to get dressed while it was still dark. Deep in the bowels of Azum-Ha, there were countless places granted security by obscurity. Nice little rhyme there.
Yeah, I'm freestyling.
Chambers that few knew existed, temples that none still lived to tell of. An altar had been prepared in the depths for this most sacred rite. The child was dressed in robes of tanned human skin and brought into the temple, the place lit only by candles. Is this noblesse oblige?
Keep going.
Flickering flames turned the faces of the adults around him into abstractions, their kindly eyes and leering grins little more than vague impressions. In this space, they were secondary. The idol resting on the altar was primary. The only thing of worth here. A skull. It was the warped skull of some half-formed abomination, a fluid being killed in the middle of a transformation. One eye socket was stretched out to such a degree that any eye would surely slip free, and the other was narrowed to a thin slit. From one temple, a mess of horns protruded, while a gnarled antler pointed from the other. The skull of Margreath the Tenderheart, one of the gene tyrants who had once ruled over the galaxy. Or, as the child's parents and all these other people called them, the Gene Nobles. So this is noblesse oblige.
Well, that's no. In the original days anyway, so that's not exclusive to Bless No Bleach.
Oh no. No, there's more than one Gene Tyrant cult. Why? What was Kingdom Moon cult about?
They were their own thing.
Oh, they loved the moon. Was it Earth's moon?
The moon was more of a symbol. It was very much like, it was almost sort of self-help, like, in a way.
Leader of the Kingdom Moon cult, like, do you not like the name?
It was I forgot. Before I became Negan Rush, I was that guy.
Ah, yes.
He got his memory wiped and turned into Negan Rush.
He just keeps doing it.
Yeah. I'm actually 60.
Look, Gregory, the child's mother whispered adoringly, her hands on his shoulders. That's what God looks like. The child just looked at the skull with dull red eyes. That was no surprise. After all, this 8-year-old boy had never smiled nor laughed since the day he was born. He was born an arrogant baby.
He was.
He just stared at the world expressionlessly, observing it dispassionately, and always seeming distinctly unimpressed by what he saw. This time was no different. He looked at the idol. He looked at the altar. He looked at the worshippers. And then he spoke. Gross. Present day.
Based.
The Victor Grave, built to honor the battle that ended the 1,000 revolutions, was visited by hundreds of thousands of people every day. More museum than memorial, it was usually filled with the babbling of crowds and the droning of holographic exhibits. Tonight, however, it was as silent as the grave. Everyone had gone home for the conclusion of the Dawn contest. That silence, however, was to be interrupted. Endo Silver Saint descended from the broken skylight into the central admissions foyer of the Victor Grave, the light from his luminescent broadsword illuminating the massive room around him. I have to say, with how shonen this world is, how many times has the Victor Grave been destroyed? Or is it usually much more well-guarded?
It's much more well-guarded. This is the Christmas of Christmases.
Oh, Lord.
It's like, if you had to work on End of Dawn Contest, it would be a scandal.
As he fell, he scanned the chamber, keen for any signs of Gregory Hazard's presence. If he was to ensure Clima reached the arena of the Absolute safely, then it was imperative he held the scoundrel Hazard off here. Even if he couldn't win, he had to delay. He was one of the 8 phases of the turning of the air, after all. There'd be nothing strange about him giving his life to keep the Supreme Heir safe. There was a thud as Endo landed in the middle of the moon's spotlight. Does every world just have exactly one moon?
This one does.
The weight of his armor causing the smooth floor to crack around him. That was when the room's security systems activated. Machine gun turrets emerged from each corner of the ceiling, each aimed directly for Endo's body. The yellow lights beneath each gun barrel flickered as they scanned him, determining whether or not he was an intruder. He used the few seconds he'd been given leisurely, planting his sword into the ground next to him and crossing his arms. No point in quibbling over measly bullets at a time like this. His honor and pride were at stake here. The lights turned red, and the turrets wasted no more time. Even as the bullets hurtled towards him, tracing red lines through space, the Silver Saint did not move. He just remained standing there, arms crossed, visor facing straight forwards. The only sign of life within that armor was the silver aether that crackled across his shoulders. Bonds of fealty! Countless tiny chains appeared throughout the room, a spiderweb of transient metal connecting each individual bullet to the room around them, and pooling, diverting their path just slightly. As a result, they went off course, the perfect aim of the turret subverted. As the room erupted into debris, bullets slamming into every inch of the walls and floor, the Silver Saint alone went untouched. He still stood with his arms crossed, waiting for the noise that would end this little intermission. Endo Silver Saint uncrossed his arms and pulled his sword out of the ground, the dust slipping off the blade as if it were water. With a lazy spin of the weapon, he deflected the strike aimed at his back, sparks flying. "I'm surprised," he said, glancing over his shoulder. "The turrets didn't activate for you, Gregory Hazard?" Hazard skidded to a halt a short distance behind Endo. He'd folded his fingers into claws and now drove one of his hands into the ground to slow the momentum that Endo's block had produced. The assassin narrowed those red eyes as he finally came to a halt, standing up straight. "Whoever designed this place is a dumbass," he said calmly. "If I fold my body up into a weird shape, the security system doesn't recognize me as an intruder. How stupid. I'd bet there are some scurrants who could just wander about this building freely." Endo adjusted his stance, holding his sword in both hands. "I shall give you one warning. Surrender!" Gregory rolled his eyes, plunging his hands into his pockets, taking the opportunity to refold them into some new wicked configuration, no doubt. "I'm curious," the red-eyed man said, strolling to the side, gaze fixed on Endo. "What's got you so loyal to Acclima? You can't seriously think that brat would make a good Supreme, could you?" Endo's reply was simple and true. "I swore an oath." Gregory raised an eyebrow. "And what oath was that?" "An oath that is none of your business, Gregory Hazard," Endo said. "I shall not hand you daggers to chip at my morale, and a blackguard like you would not understand loyalty, no matter how much I tried to explain." "Loyalty?" Gregory said, cocking his head. "That's kinda weird, though, right? My commander's meant to be a toy Muzazi. Aren't I just being loyal to him right now?" "He gives you your orders, true," Endo said, "but you are sworn to the service of the Supreme Heir." Gregory snapped his fingers. "And the toy Muzazi's the Supreme Heir now, so I guess I'm very loyal, huh?" Endo pulled his sword back, silver aether broiling around him. "He is a usurper," he hissed, "and you are but his dog. Fear not, however! I shall put you down promptly." Gregory narrowed his eyes at the display of righteous anger. "Oh? Did I chip at that morale a little after all? Wait, he's based? Why is he so quick-witted? He's like the menswear guy." "Oath sworn!" The glowing chains appeared once more, but this time they did not bind or pull anything. Instead, as they manifested, they wrapped around the blade of Endo's broadsword, layers upon layers of them, so dense that no gaps existed, so massive their number that the sword became a club 5 times its former size in an instant. Gregory's eyes widened. This, at least, it seemed he hadn't anticipated. He didn't have long to savor the surprise. With a mighty roar, Endo swung his weapon, the size and speed of the club enough to demolish the entire room as it swept forth. Pillars were shattered one after another, and even as Gregory leapt backwards, the air pressure alone was enough to send him smashing through the wall, leaving a sizable hole. Endo wasn't done. He understood perfectly well that Acclima was Hazard's true target. If he let the miscreant out of his sight, he would no doubt resume his pursuit of the true heir. Banishing the chains from his sword, Endo used bonds of fealty to launch himself through the hole in the wall, tucking in his arms so that he could fit. Like an armored missile, he hurtled forth into the next room, and a chain pulled him towards the ceiling, just out of reach of Gregory's next blow. Gregory clicked his tongue as he saw Endo land amidst the rafters. This time he hadn't reshaped one of his limbs in order to attack. He'd taken hold of a huge chunk of rubble, and folded it using his abilities, forming a crude battle axe. It was hardly the sharpest weapon, but when infused with aether it would surely suffice to take a head off. Endo inspected their new battlefield. They'd landed in one of the more prominent exhibits in the Victor House, containing the supposed corpse of the mightiest gene tyrant, Otrera. It was said that when Azez the Absolute had finally burnt away Otrera's consciousness after 3 days of battle, the gene tyrant's corpse had engorged and spread to form a hideous grave. Looking at it now, Endo couldn't deny that assessment. A castle of bone was spread out below him, taking up the majority of the massive circular chamber. Dozens of rib cages, the smallest among them the size of a car, and hundreds of grinning skulls staring sightlessly into the night. Thousands of spinal cords formed a knobbly ground, indistinct spikes and limp fur protruding from every gap in the vile construction. A path had been set up so that visitors could be taken on a guided tour through the carcass, but Endo couldn't imagine willingly stepping foot inside such an evil thing. He stood up straight, sword in one hand, looking down at Gregory Hazard. The paper man stared back up at him.
I ate the paper fruits.
This is Gregory talking, right?
Yeah.
Just so you know, he said, voice snide. It's nothing personal. I've got nothing against you or that brat. It's just that I can't make my dream come true if I'm not on the side of a winning Supreme. Your dream? Endo shifted his stance slightly. You interested? An obvious tactic to make Endo lower his guard. Hardly, he snorted. Gregory shrugged lightly. Worth a try, he sighed, and the room exploded into violence once again. Hazard launched himself up to meet Endo, his body a dervish of blade limbs, and Endo swung his sword to meet him. Sparks made fireworks as steel met paper. There, atop the building skeleton above the corpse's skeleton they danced, blazing points of white and silver aether flowing across the rafters. In terms of speed, Gregory was far superior to Endo, but the knight was able to compensate with bonds of fealty. If a chain pulled at an arm, his strikes could be accelerated. If a chain pulled him backwards, he could dodge a lethal blow. Hazard folded and unfolded himself again and again as he struck at the knight from all angles. Axes became swords, became scythes, became spears, each of them constantly striking, each of them probing for any gap in Endo's defenses. The Silver Stain understood now that Hazard had surely been holding back. The speed was far beyond what he'd used in his earlier attacks. Before, he had been testing Endo's reaction speed. Now he sought to conquer it. A fire started below, lit by the sparks that rained down from their clash, but neither stopped to notice it. That was not an option. Their attention was focused entirely on each other. In a bout between opponents of this level, the first mistake would be fatal. But mistakes are inevitable. It was the simplest thing that took Endo's Silver Saint's head. Gregory swung his arm as it refolded, and, predicting his limb would become an axe, an axe. Endo pulled his sword up with bonds of fealty to block. He hadn't been wrong. The limb did indeed become an axe, hurtling towards Endo's quick defense, while white aether burning along its blade. However, that was only for a moment. Paper, Hazard breathed. Moon. Before the blow could make contact, Gregory's entire body folded and reshaped itself, becoming a massive, razor-sharp shuriken. It was too late for Endo to adjust his movements further. He had already committed to a fruitless defense. There was a screech of metal as Gregory's spinning body sliced through Endo's armor, and so it was that the knight's head was torn from his body. Well, said Gregory, holding the helmet up by the plume as he unfolded his body. I was sort of expecting this, truth be told. He shook the helmet up and down, listening to the rattling. With guys like you who can use tricks with the environment, the best strategy is to constantly attack. You're so busy deflecting my strikes that you can't spare any focus to set up complex maneuvers with your chains. Then, once you're used to my rhythm, I change it and catch you out. I've killed plenty of people with that same kind of trick. He turned his head to look back at the site of his attempted murder. And, he finished, to tell the truth, I was sort of expecting this as well. Oh, because he bond of fealtied his head to his neck like a Doulahan? Endo Silver Saint was still standing there. Even with his head severed, he remained standing on the rafters, sword held in stable hand. The black hole of the Silver Saint's neck seemed to stare at Gregory like a single dark eye. The armor was empty. For a moment, the decapitated armor grasped at empty air where its head had been, body language full of confusion and terror. "What?" came Endo's sourceless voice, trembling. Where's my... What happened? What happened to... Then his arms fell slack, and he spoke again. Bonds of fealty. Endo Silver Saint's voice had changed. Gone was the firm dignity of a chivalrous knight. Instead, his voice was hoarse metal, iron scraping against raw flesh, cold fury barely contained by a cage of steel. Perhaps that was still in some way a righteous fury, but still. That voice was full of malice. She's in the story?
Oh.
A white chain appeared, linking the empty helmet Gregory was holding to the empty armor standing before him. With a vicious tug, the helmet was pulled from Gregory's grasp and reattached to the hollow armor. And, wait a minute, Ethan? Hold on a second. Is this on purpose?
No, you just brain rotted.
No. And No reached up with a gauntleted hand and pushed down on the top of the helmet, slotting it back into place. It was as if the injury had never even happened, and really Gregory supposed that it hadn't. His heart ached to see it. "You saw," the Silver Saint rasped. "Didn't you, Hazard?" "Obviously I saw." Gregory put a hand on his hip. "Is that a canned response? What are you really anyway, an automatic?" The nightstand didn't so much as twitch. "Self-aware Aether armament designated Silver Saint. Personality simulation has been terminated." Gregory whistled. "Fancy." He cocked his head. "If you've tossed away your personality, though, doesn't that mean you've lost your Aether?" "The underlying consciousness is intact," the Silver Saint spat. "And no Silver Saint is mere camouflage, the facsimile of a knight of honor, a parody of a toy Musashi." "I see." Gregory
Imagine being
clasped
that big of a hater.
Yeah, to make like a fucking mockery as your little butt
I made
buddy.
a guy to make fun of you.
You know what? This is only the second time this has happened to Musashi. Zanzinik, anybody? "I see." Gregory clasped his hands behind his back, folding them into blades while they were out of sight. "So you're not human at all, really, are you? Who's controlling you, Hapgrass?" "There is no reason to answer that. There is no benefit to your continued existence." Well, Gregory could see where this was going. "Die!" The Aether armament launched itself forward. Can we popcorn? My tummy hurts.
Sure. Up to this point, it had thought while doing its best to fulfill the role of an honourable knight. As such, it made decisions that, while not bad, were not the best.
Ooh, wrong word there, buddy.
Personality simulation. End it. Now I'll fucking kill you. Honor-bound strikes and honor-bound guards. That wasn't the case anymore. The Silver Saint unleashed a relentless and ruthless flurry of blows, passing its sword from hand to hand as it struck at Gregory with inhuman strength. Gregory's specialty wasn't defense in the first place, and so he chose to evade, folding and unfolding his body out of the way of attacks. Right now, against this method of assault, this was his best option. If he tried to escape completely, he'd open himself up to an attack. Of course, as the Silver Saint had said, it was not an automatic. There was no guarantee it would keep doing the same thing forever. The Silver Saint tossed its sword up into the air, the weapon spinning end over end as it rose. Gregory's eyes flicked up instinctively to track it, and in that moment the Silver Saint lunged forward. That second of distraction had been a second too long. Bonds of fealty! Chains wrapping themselves around its fists like knuckle dusters. Rats themselves, sorry. And the Silver Saint unleashed a flurry of devastating punches against Gregory, faster and more agile than any boxer. Cruel iron fists smashed into Gregory faster than he could dodge, and with a final haymaker to his chin, Gregory Hazard was sent flying off the rafters.
Hold on, can that second to last line before Cruel Iron?
Yeah.
Can you repeat that last part?
Faster and more agile than any boxer?
Somewhere on Talden, the Shooting Star Security Solution is crying.
He is the fastest non-Aether user.
He's in a league of his own.
It was a infusion alone that saved him. His time in the Special Officers Commission, his time in the Honest Men, they had forged good instincts. Right before that final blow had hit, Gregory had focused all of his infusion to his chin, a pinpoint defence that would have proved fatal if his hunch had been off. Only because of that was he able to remain conscious. Sorry, let me spruce up this answer there. Only because...
I love how all you had to do was add only, but instead you erased the whole sentence.
I like this way. I like the sentence better. Paper Moon! Gregory folded his arms into flat shapes like wings, turning his fall into a glide. He swooped down into the frozen carcass of the greatest gene tyrant, eager to put distance between himself and his opponent, but there's no escape! The Silver Saints would not let him go so easily. He locked in.
Yeah, dude, you're going off. I love it.
As he descended into the massive corpse, the Silver Saint pursued, running on all fours, and jumped from rib to rib after him.
Oh my god, the Hellhound! Welcome back, born whatever year it is now.
Well, actually, that kind of works, yeah.
Welcome back, Hellhound.
All the supposed dignity of a knight had truly been thrown away. This was a monster after him now. Seeing that his escape route was about to be cut off, Gregory tried to veer and return, but the beast was too fast for him. Each movement was accompanied by a flash of steel silver. The Silver Saint seized hold of Gregory's leg once more, slammed him into the ground, and then pounced on him, metal hands wrapped around his throat. In the alcove that once contained Oshera's heart, Gregory Hazard wrestled with death. It took all his strength and most of his aether to just barely pry the Silver Saint's fingers away from his neck, but he managed it. He bought himself the tiniest freedom to breathe, and the tiniest freedom to speak. "I want," he gasped, "to ask you something." The Silver Saint sneered. "There is no reason for me to ever share combat information with the likes of you, Paper Moon." Popcorn.
Oh boy. Gregory Hazard was a troublesome one. White aether flared around him as he folded the ground the two of them were wrestling on, destabilizing the Silver Saint's grip further, and then kicked hard against the knight's chest plate with pinpoint white aether, sending it flying backwards. Excuse me. As the aether armament landed on its feet, no worse for wear, Gregory rolled into a kneeling position. "It's not that," Gregory said, massaging his neck with one hand. "I just want to know, how does it feel?" "What?" "When I kicked you just now," Gregory continued, a strangely anxious energy leaking into his body language. "How did it feel? Did it hurt? Did you imagine what the pain was like? Or was it just information that you could do what you wanted with?" Pathetic.
"You already know this won't work, Hazard. There is no reason to tell you that."
Right. Gregory quietly nodded, hair hanging over his face. "It's just that, well, it's sort of embarrassing, but..." He looked up, and his crimson eyes were almost sparkling with sickly enthusiasm. "Well, I guess I'm kind of jealous of you." That the Silver Saint had clearly not expected. It cocked its helmet, plume flopping like a ponytail.
"Jealous?"
Slowly, Gregory pulled himself up off the ground, arms swaying limply. His gaze remained fixed on the Silver Saint, though. Was this some kind of trick? Was he baiting the Silver Saint to come closer? For the time being, the best move would be to observe. The Silver Saint gripped its broadsword in both hands. "Yeah," Gregory said softly. "There's nothing human about you at all, is there? Not really. Pain and suffering, living and dying, happiness and sorrow. You don't have to worry about any of it. You've escaped all that. Ah, damn it. I am jealous. It really is embarrassing." Why is he a Danganronpa character? I love it. Boy is like a crazy, like... He's like a transhumanist that wants to like... experience nirvana? Or no, enlightenment? Like Buddhist enlightenment? He wants to leave it all behind. The man was just rambling to himself now.
"What is your point?"
Gregory Hazard kept talking, head down, but the Silver Saint didn't know whether that was a response to what it had just said. "I knew someone," Hazard said, "years ago. Not exactly like you, but someone who wasn't human either. We were partners for a while. I don't think she thought much of me. But the things she could do, the things she could be..." My cat's in the way of the screen, sorry. "Beyond anything I could have imagined. Marie Hazard. Do you know her? You've probably heard her name at some point. The first name, I mean. I probably shouldn't spill this so easily, but... she was a gene tyrant, you know? The very last of them."
"Enough of this,"
the Silver Saint scoffed, taking a step forward.
"I've no interest in your tepid life story, Hazard."
"She died," Gregory murmured, hair hanging over his face. "A few years ago now, on Panacea. I heard she died, and I just had this thought." His arms stayed left to right, right to... I assume swayed. Yeah. Left to right to left as he took a step forward as well. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Again and again. That... He looked up. "That thing belonged to me." It was that art! What is going on with his eye? Is this like artistic depiction, or does he have like a
yes.
fucked up eye? Oh, it's so cool! What the hell? I'm now Gregory's #1 fan. Holy shit! They're gonna go crazy over
His
this
malice.
one. Gulp. Hello, Gregory. It was a feral sort of stillness that possessed the face of the man before the Silver Saint, a snake in the moment before it struck, a lion in the moment before it pounced. But somehow worse, somehow impure. There was a hollow hunger there. Unlike the whims of beasts, it was not something that could be sated. Gregory's Hazard's voice was cold as ice as he hissed. I gave her my name. I gave her my face. And what do I get in return? Nothing. Nothing but false hope. Having to look at the sort of freedom I could never have. It was curious. When the Silver Saint ceased personality simulation, all of its emotions, save for those helpful in combat, seemed to disappear. They weren't erased, per se, but they were suppressed to such a degree that they might as well have been. Even if some tiny trace of sorrow or joy or longing remained in the Silver Saint's heart, it was minute enough to be invisible. Which was why it was curious. Right now, the Silver Saint could feel a distinct disgust towards the thing standing before it.
You are mad.
Gregory looked up, his eyes focusing, as if remembering for the first time in a while that the Silver Saint was still here. Mad? He muttered, dangerously soft. Gregory Hazard smiled. Gregory Hazard laughed. Sure! He cried, spreading his arms wide as he gestured to the carcass land around him. If I'm mad, then here's my madness! We've done it! We've escaped these disgusting fucking cages of being human, and what do? We lock ourselves back in!
You wish to become a gene tyrant.
Want out! Gregory snarled, tugging at his collar like he was trying to rip his shirt open. Out! Out! I want out of this disgusting fucking body! I want out of this disgusting fucking species! People look at these things, these gene tyrants, and they either hate them or they love them. That's wrong, that's gross! If you see something that much greater than you, you shouldn't love it or hate it. You should become it. You should tear it open and wear its skin until it's yours! Until you're it! The Silver Saint listened to Gregory's rant in silence, and it was only when he stopped to breathe that it raised its sword above its head once more.
You cannot be allowed to live,
It said simply.
Oath sworn!
Oh, he's like, that's fucked.
Yeah, he's like, oh, I'm a villain, and even I think that's a little far. The sword erupted into silver chains once more, illuminating the room, and the Silver Saint brought that shining blade down towards Gregory's head. But you showed me something good, Gregory breathed. So I'll repay the favor. He looked up, the blade an inch from his forehead. The unfolded world! Oh dear. Hold on, is this Halloween Devil? What's happening? Do you want to do this?
What do you mean?
Do you want to take over this part?
Yeah, sure. My ability, Paper Moon, Gregory said casually, returning his face to its usual mask, returning his hands to their usual pockets, allows me to fold and reshape anything I infuse however I like. I mean, I say that, but it's not the whole truth, you know? He walked along the calcified flesh of the strongest gene tyrants, looking up towards the ceiling. I mean, I say all that, but it's not 100% accurate. I mean, I can reshape things to a degree, an armor or a sword, or a car into a paper aeroplane, but I'm still just maneuvering the original object, right? There's limits to it, and I kinda hate things that are limited. The Silver Saint's metal legs dangled in the air. So after I parted ways with that thing I told you about, I started to work on a new ability, Gregory continued. The idea was to create a new fold in something, right? A non-existent sort of fold. It's a difficult one to explain. So then, when I unfold it, I'm creating something new, entirely new. The Silver Saint's arms twitched, all but locked in place. I wanted to make it so I could reshape the world however I like, create anything I like. The Silver Saint stared helplessly down at its foe. But in the end, Gregory stopped. All I could manage were blades. All around them, the corpse of the gene tyrant had changed, and the surrounding chamber too. Nearly every inch of available space had erupted into sharp, thin spikes, like a colony of sea urchins, impaling the Silver Saint from every angle. Spikes of bone and spikes of steel and spikes of brick and spikes of glass, holding it up on high, keeping it trapped in a prison of blades. Again it twitched, but that was all it was able to do. Thanks for letting me talk, Gregory smiled thinly. I don't get a chance to open up often. See you around. As though they were just friends who'd met on the streets, Gregory turned on his heel and began to walk away. "Where?" The Silver Saint groaned. "Are you going?" Gregory glanced over his shoulder. "Did you forget? I'm gonna go kill that Bradder climber. Don't worry." He smirked. "Against Hadrian, it'll be a mercy killing."
Is he working with Hadrian?
And we were saying, like, it's better I kill her than Hadrian does.
Oof.
Endo Silver Saint was nothing but a facade, a mask that had temporarily believed itself to be real. It protected a climber because that was the directive it had been given. If it was ordered to kill a climber, it would have done so without hesitation. There were limits to its orders, though. In a situation like this, where its own existence was at stake, the correct course of action would be to stay put and await retrieval. It had already been defeated. There was no purpose in provoking a final blow. It knew that to be true, but I'm gonna go kill that Bradder climber. But for some reason, I'm gonna go kill that Bradder climber. For some reason, I'm gonna kill that Bradder climber. The correct course of action had changed.
He's human!
The Silver Saint tore itself free from the spikes with a bestial roar, shredding its armour and sending scraps of metal flying in every direction. Silver chains pulled together what little of the armour survived, and it was bonds of fealty alone that kept the Silver Saint's body intact as it landed on the floor. It had so many holes in it that the scenery behind it was visible from every angle, and only one arm and one leg remained, such as they were. This body would not last more than a few seconds, but the Silver Saint could move fast enough for that. A train of light pulled its discarded sword to its remaining hand, and it swung the weapon with all its strength. "Hazard!" Gregory just turned, looked at him with those dull red eyes, and sighed. "Oh," he said, distinctly disappointed. "You're human after all." Pale skin turned white and dry. "Gross." And the Silver Saint felt the final grasp of something almost inhuman.
You know who Gregory would love?
Who?
Jim Crack. They would have been besties.
Gregory seems normal at first, though.
Oh my god, that was a good one. Gregory went from a character I was like mildly curious about to like I need to know his whole. I need more. That was good.
Alright, peace, obviously. He was a real one.
Yeah, sure, something like that.
Well, he wasn't a real one, he was a fake one, but...
Give me a moment. Do we have any Aether questions?
I think we did. I think I saw a couple earlier.
Alright. Greenie asks, is there a reason the Shepherdess hasn't tried to become Supreme yet?
She does not want to be, like, a big public figure. She wants to be the maintenance person who keeps it all running, basically. Because if she's Supreme, then she can't act freely, basically. Because she's, like, everyone can see what Supreme's doing.
Nod, nod. Lan asks, were there planets that were like Lilith worlds during the Gene Tyrant's reign? Like human civilizations that weren't enslaved and potentially didn't even know about the GTs?
It's possible. It would be much more rare, though. It would have been very few of those if they did exist.
It would be like a Gene Tyrant who left to go get milk and cigarettes and never came back.
Exactly, it would be something like that. Because the Lilith worlds, as a phenomenon, are specifically ones that fell out of contact post-Thousand Revolutions, usually.
Yeah. That's very interesting. Besides Panacea, Weiser asks, besides Panacea, what treatments exist to treat major nerve damage?
They got a few treatments. There's been mention of vague stimulants that sort of accelerate natural healing. They can do transplants and stuff.
Alright.
There's a couple of options depending on the scenario.
Roger that. Alright, guys. Well, thank you all for watching, and we will see you next time.
Bye!